start with you, Philip.
Thank you. Thank you and good morning. Am I turned on here?
Yeah.
Everybody hear me? My experiences in Kosovo were completely proximate, I guess is the really quick answer to your question. I was living and working in the courts in Kosovo, living in Pristina, Kosovo, the capital of that, at the time, province, now arguably a country. And when you're on the ground in the middle of the, you hate to be too dramatic, but the injustice, we'll call it, or the chaos, decisions get made on a minute-by-minute daily basis. And what I found is you just have to try. The international community just has to try. You have to try and impose some kind of order. I always kid that I came away from there thinking what a great thing bureaucracy is. People to fill out forms, to stamp passports, to just do the things that write parking tickets, just the things that we come to expect in a well-ordered society. When you don't have that, when you have no accountability, you go down a very bad path as a group of humans trying to live together. So, in answer to the question, things were very proximate, and one of my big tasks was trying to get police officers to come to court. My first trial there involved attempted murder of a police officer and his family. This is an officer who had the temerity to try and do his job. And I was looking over the case file and getting ready for the trial, and I was thinking, well, this is good. We're going to win this trial. I mean, we have a police officer who was shot at. He knows the person who was shooting at him. He wounded a friend of his who was standing right next to him. There was words exchanged. Everybody knew everybody. No problem. So I sent a subpoena to the officer to come to court, and he immediately fled to Montenegro because the person I was asking him to testify against was one of the bigger thugs in Kosovo at the time. Not really even one of the top tier inside the government people, but just a kind of a musclehead. And we were able to cajole him back into Kosovo and go to trial. But just little steps are really important in imposing some kind of order at the beginnings of society. I'll stop there for now.
It's an all-you-in all-the-time panel, I think. My wife was in Kosovo as a representative of the International Rescue Committee, which is the largest refugee organization in the United States, and then became the American director of the United Nations and special assistant to Kofi Annan, so that we're probably all UN fans here. I am anyway. I wrote this book because of these things. I wrote the book because of Abu Ghraib. I had been around the world enough and lived both here and abroad, and was cut really by the hatred that grew up about America and about its role in the world. And I was determined to write about the country I thought I grew up in, about what America was. I was 6 years old when the Berlin airlift happened. And I looked for a long time for a story and finally came upon, largely forgotten by history, the extraordinary adventure and story that was the Berlin airlift. As Marla mentioned, the Soviets, Berlin was 110 miles inside East Germany. There was a road that led from Helmstedt in the British sector and railroads and canals leading into the city, and that's the way we supplied West Berlin, which was jointly occupied by the Americans, the British, and the French. Stalin decided, actually on March 19th, one of the few minutes that survive in the Kremlin about this, on March 19th of 1948, he met with the leaders of East Germany and hatched the plan to try to drive the Allies out, thinking that the Allies would leave before they would let More than 1 million people starved to death in a city that was really a pile of rubble. People were living in caves. 85% of the housing was destroyed by our bombing. The stench of death was still everywhere because there were bodies under those piles of rubble. And when Stalin put on the blockade, the British first brought up the idea of trying to supply the city by air, and they calculated it would take 4,500 tons a day to keep the city alive in food, medicine, fuel, which was very important. There was only an hour a day of electricity in West Berlin at that time. On June 24th of 1948, Harry Truman called in his cabinet, the new National Security Council, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And in those days, the Joint Chiefs of Staff were people like Omar Bradley, who had been a great hero in World War II. They voted that day on June 24th, unanimously, to leave Berlin, that there was no way we, with 6,500 troops, surrounded by 4 million of the Red Army. The Red Army stayed in Germany and in Eastern Europe because they had never been paid during the war. And Stalin was using the pretty worthless currency, in Germany's case, the Reichsmark, to pay the soldiers, the pay they had never had. So it was a real reason he wanted to be there and wanted to get us out. On June 26th, 2 days after that unanimous vote, I'll end the meeting. When the meeting was finished, Truman, I've done too many presidents, Truman said, "We stay in Berlin, period," and got up and started to walk out of the room. Robert Lovett, one of the wise men, said, "Mr. President, have you thought this through? All the Soviets need to overrun Berlin is shoes." And Truman did not answer him. And on June 26th, 2 days after that, phones rang all over the country where people had phones. Western Union telegrams were delivered to the pilots, crews, mechanics, statisticians, air traffic controllers, the people, transportation experts, the people who made up the Berlin Airlift, the daring young men in my book. This was one of them, and then I'll stop. Edwin Gear had been a captain, a lieutenant, bombing with a B-24, had just finished Alfred University in upstate New York and had been accepted at the University of New Mexico Law School. His wife had gotten a job as a school teacher in Albuquerque. This is what happened then. Lieutenant Gear, said a sweet-voiced Western Union operator, nobody had called him that since he returned home after flying B-24s. "You have a telegram from the Air Force. I'll read it and send it right on to you. By direction of the President of the United States, you are ordered back to active duty for the Berlin Airlift, reporting to Camp Kilmer in New Jersey within 48 hours. That happened all over. This was a different country then. Many of these people were in small towns, and that night police spread out to knock on the doors and tell them they had 48 hours to report on active duty. The first day of the Berlin Airlift, they were able to move only 70 tons. And as one British pilot said, the airlift is a collection of aircraft parts flying in loose formation. The United States had demobilized. Our aircraft were sitting in the sun in Arizona, the boneyards there. By the end of the airlift, the daring young men, helped by a lot of daring young Germans too, I might add, who in the end we used the Luftwaffe for the maintenance, because these planes were carrying 6 and 7. They're flying 6 and 7 times as much as they were designed to, and carrying more weight than they were designed to.